Welcome to the Life You Love podcast.
We're your hosts, Grace Lemire
and Erin Convertini.
This podcast is for the dreamers and the doers.
For the women who want to create a life they genuinely love waking up to.
We believe that life's short, so let's build one we love.
As long as this isn't your very first time listening to the podcast, you can probably tell what today's big announcement is and why we're so excited to be filming today's episode. We have officially rebranded the podcast and we are no longer Girls Talk Money. We've rebranded into the Life You Love podcast and we genuinely could not be more excited about it. This is something that we've been working on for months and I'm so proud of us for taking action on this as soon as we felt called to do so. We have so many exciting things that we want to do with this brand in the very near future that we hope you guys will be just as excited about. And we wanted to film this episode today to talk about why we rebranded, what you can expect from us with the podcast moving forward, and ultimately what a life you love means to us. We really feel like this brand has such a stronger mission and this is so much more authentic for us. So we cannot wait to share it with you. We are so excited to announce that the Life You Love community is going international. In February of 2025, we are hosting an international group trip and retreat to Colombia with EF Ultimate Break. If you've never traveled with EF Ultimate Break before or have never taken a group trip before, think 1 week surrounded by 20 to 40 like-minded women that can truly become your best friends. I've taken countless group trips in my life and it's the perfect way to travel more even if you don't have anyone to travel with or if planning the trips and figuring out the logistics of the trip stresses you out. In Colombia, we're having a week of sightseeing, beaches, boats, and of course building a community of like-minded women, which we could not be more excited about. If you want to see the full trip itinerary, learn more, or book the trip, we'll put the link in the show notes. Now let's get back to the episode.
It feels crazy to be like saying it out loud just because we've literally been talking about this for so long behind the scenes and we both love to yap. Like we literally have a podcast for a reason and having to not yap about this publicly has been such a challenge. Because when did we start actually talking about rebranding? What, like April maybe?
It was, I was still in Pittsburgh for sure. So I think it was at the beginning of the summer and this was actually Grace's idea. And you know what's so funny about this is something that like totally did not come as a shock to me when Grace brought it up to me in probably like May or June, right? So and the reason why is because kind of like the root of how we chose the name Girls Talk Money was not our first choice for a name for a podcast. We originally, it was called Chapter 20 something. Remember that? Like very early days, we had this Canva document of like these little like graphics and stuff we were making for our brand. And we were originally going to call the podcast Chapter 20 something because we wanted it to be a life, career, and money podcast for women in their 20s. So we were like, what can we name the podcast that kind of like encompasses all of that? But then we sort of said like, okay, you know what? At the time, both of our audiences for our personal brands were very much so in the personal finance space. People knew us for the budgeting content and the investing content. And we just didn't feel like our audiences would kind of like translate over to a podcast community if we didn't do a money focused podcast. So we did that for about a year. We're coming up on our 1 year anniversary of the podcast. And Grace came to me and was like, honestly, I just sort of feel like we're doing ourselves a disservice by not zooming out and by only focusing on money.
It's funny because when I brought it up to you too, we have like a monthly planning meeting where we like map out, okay, what are the episodes we're going to do for the next month? And like, are we going to bring on some guests? We need to reach out to them. Like, what things are we doing? What emails do we have to do? All that type of stuff. And I came into that meeting and I was like nervous to say it because I was like, crap, like we ultimately are two like 25-year-olds that co-own a business together, and that definitely adds an added layer of like, oh shoot, if I feel like we should change this and Erin doesn't, and what is that actually going to look like how would we move forward? And I remember when I said it, you were like, no, I've been feeling the same way, like I think we should. And I was like, oh god, like thank God, like I was so glad that it was mutual, because then when we started to actually map out what the next chapter was going to look like for the podcast, we've had so many more ideas. Like, and it's funny going back to when we first came up with the idea to do a podcast and we started talking about it, we had all these long-term visions too for the podcast, which we'll talk more about in this episode as well. But like, we want to do like in-person events. We want to like bring women together. We want to like genuinely help people create a life that they love. But we decided to like, yeah, we started with the personal finance thing. And it's just funny because part of the reason why we're changing things around is that we feel like the money niche is limiting a little bit. And you know, we've talked about this too. Like, we don't want to bring people together necessarily for an in-person event on how to like pay off your debt. Like, that
Yeah.
doesn't sound like that's not what we want to do. Like,
It's not
yes,
what we're passionate about
right.
at the end of the
Yeah.
day, and I think like we ultimately are passionate about being financially responsible
Right.
and being good with your money, but and this is kind of why like at the beginning of the episode I said I genuinely do think that this brand has such a stronger mission. We have said in so many podcast episodes that money is only a tool to live the life that you love. We literally
Hmm.
said that, and that was like not intentional. We didn't choose this name based on that,
Yeah.
but like after we kind of chose this name, I was like, oh crap, like we talk about this all the time. Money is not an end all be all. Money is not the, like, you should not be thinking about money and your finances at every waking moment.
Hmm.
And like saving X amount in whatever is not like the end all be all.
Yeah.
It's a tool to help you build the life that you love. And only focusing on the money, I think, is putting way too much emphasis on it
Hmm.
and is kind of like not allowing people to like remind them of what it's supposed to be.
Right. Then you become so focused on like optimizing, yeah, like your investment strategy and your saving and your whatever, that it's like, are you actually using it as a tool to create a life you love? Like, what does that life that you love actually look like? How are you using money to create that, rather than just being like, oh, how am I saving more this month? Constantly in that mindset. And part of the reason we have made this change as well is that so much money content that's out there, and financial education and things like that are rooted in scarcity. And we've done episodes before talking about like mindset and abundance and things like that, and that's what's so much more aligned and important to us. Like, we don't want I don't want to talk about like constantly like money stuff that's going to make other people feel like, yeah, that they have to be in a mode of scarcity all the time. Like, I want people to think like, okay, like, I know what my dream life looks like. How can I leverage money? Yeah, how can I use it as a tool to genuinely create that life? Like, what can I start doing today that is going to take me from point A to point B? Because ultimately, like, money is a big factor of that. Like, it's one aspect. There's so many other aspects to creating a life you love, but money is a big part in that. And I think that I don't know, for me, that was something that I was kind of like getting not tired of in a way, but kind of like, I was like, okay, like, I'm talking about, yeah, saving, but I'm like, what are you saving for? What are you using that for? How is that actually like moving your life forward? That's like the piece that I think is far
Yeah.
more important to me. You know what I mean? And more exciting to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. And I kind of think back to the beginning of my money journey and what was the most inspiring to me about personal finance content, and largely personal finance content being podcasts and books at the time. This was like the pre TikTok era and I didn't really watch like YouTube videos or anything. So really just podcasts and books. And what was the most inspiring to me was all of the content around people doing really awesome things with their money. Like, it was
Hmm.
still money content, but I wasn't listening to podcast episodes being like step by step, how do I budget, or step by step, how do I pay off debt? Because at the end of the day, I can go Google that. I
Hmm.
can go Google debt payoff strategies. I can go Google like, what does an ideal budget look like? Why does that content need to come from us? And how many times can we make an episode that gives you step by step instructions on how to budget? And all of that content still lives on our podcast. And
Right.
if that is something that you want, to like go reference back to, or you want to go read a book on, like, that's amazing. But we really want this to be a place to be like, okay, now that you got those financial fundamentals down, what can you do with your money? Like, truly, what can money be for you? And what opportunities and like what lifestyle can it give you? And I think that's
Yeah.
what's really inspiring. Like, we have so many ideas for the podcast in terms of guests that we want to bring on, people just doing like really cool things with their money and like really building their dream life because they got their money in check.
And I think also we want this to be more of a, I guess, like more of a brand, but also like a community focused brand. Like, I know, like, speaking for myself, I don't want to show up every week and just like talk at people. Like, I want to talk with everyone, and I want to like bring people together, like online in community spaces, but also in person in community spaces. And I think for us as individuals, having a financial education community was just not it. Like, that just didn't feel like, okay, yeah, like, that's the most exciting thing for us. Like, having this broader community where it's like, oh, like, someone over, this girl's over here is creating this life that she's after. Like, this girl, like, the life that she's after involves like starting a business, or this one's having a family, or this whatever. And being like, yeah, how are we like helping you actually
Mhm.
get closer and closer to that life you love, knowing that what the lives you want to create are going to look different. And that's like, you know what I mean? That is
Mhm.
so much more exciting and inspiring to me. And also, I think that like you were saying with hearing like cool stories, I always love listening to like podcasts or YouTube videos or TikToks or whatever of people doing cool things, even if it has nothing to do with me or what my goals are, but just hearing how someone else is building something that is so exciting to them, or yeah, just flourishing and living a life they genuinely enjoy. It inspires me to go after what I want, even if it's different. And I think that that's just, I don't know, that's just more of where we see the brand going. And I think that that's the move, that like,
Yeah.
because we're limiting ourselves ultimately at this point too, and honestly doing our audience like a disservice by not talking about all the things that we want to talk about and by limiting ourselves to one specific niche, that it just made so much sense to expand.
Definitely. I think like one core pillar of the entire like idea for the podcast was always community, and we always
Hmm.
wanted this to be a community focused platform. But I think with money we just weren't really excited about it. With Girls
Yeah.
Talk Money we were kind of like, okay, well, if we do anything in person, like how do we tie back in that financial education pillar? But again, we were never trying to coin ourselves as like personal finance experts or financial advisors. Neither of us have goals to become financial
No.
advisors ever. Like we wanted this to be kind of like a place where, yeah, maybe you can learn like a little bit from each episode, but it's just chatty and conversational and you feel like you're having a conversation with a friend. And with Girls Talk Money, we just always felt like we had to tie back that education piece. And not saying that in our episodes moving forward you're not going to learn things, but
Right.
we want to kind of like come at this as we're the hosts in this community and you're going to get something out of it, but what you get out of it might not even be from us. And we feel like we just have so many more opportunities to do that with the Life That You Love brand, really building a brand for ambitious women to have people in their circle that are doing really cool things and it inspires them to do really cool things. I know I was telling you earlier this morning that Grace is in person right now. If you're listening or
We're
if
in
you're watching, if
Nashville
you're
at
watching the
Erin's
video of this,
apartment.
you can tell that we're in person. So Grace and I have like been able to catch up for the past couple of days, and like we've been yapping away 24/7, which has been so fun. We want to do this a lot more for the episodes moving forward. But I was telling you this morning about like one of the biggest benefits of being a creator, but specifically in the finance space, is the community that we've built,
Mhm.
or not the community that we've built, but the community that we've been able to be a part of over the last couple of years. And what I mean by this is creating content online in this sort of like niche gives you access to a bunch of other people that are essentially doing the same thing. And over the last couple of years, we've met like 100 to 150 specific finance creators that are so entrepreneurial, so driven, so ambitious. I'm in like a Discord something with like a bunch of them, you
Mhm.
know what I mean? And just like having access to all of these people that are so ambitious and so inspiring has like really moved the needle for me. And what we were talking about earlier in relation to that is most people don't feel like they have that. They don't feel like their circle is full of people who are either where they want to be or where they might not even realize that they want to be,
Mhm.
because some of these people that we've become friends with over the last couple of years have accomplished things that I didn't even know were
Oh yeah.
possible. Like
Mhm.
did not like was not even in the realm of my mindset, and it's just expanded my mind so much. And that's such a benefit of being in those types of communities. And we were like, that's like such a gap that I feel like isn't filled right now, especially for women in their 20s. And that's the sort of community that we want to be the hosts of.
And I think also like, not to get deep, but I think about like the like legacy I want to have and like that we want to have as a brand. Like I want people to like come to like an event for the Life You Love and like meet friends and then leave that event and be like actually go hang out with those friends, or like come to like some sort of event and hit it off with someone, have a good conversation and be like, wow, we're actually working towards like similar things. Like I want to continue that friendship and like continue learning from this person. Like I don't want to have like, I mean, obviously I want people to listen to the podcast, whatever, but I want people to like listen to the podcast and then be like, I want to be part of that community. Like I don't want to just be like a bystander, like listening every week, and there's value in that, right? But I want to be able to take you guys like offline, you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
to like come with us on our trip and like go meet other girls in person and meet people like through like a Facebook group and like really like build connections, because like you were saying, that's where so much of the like inspiration and empowerment comes from. And we were just talking about this morning too, and I said that like I have a friend who is a creator as well, and we had a great call. And this was before she really started monetizing her page. She had no idea she could monetize, and I was like giving her tips and tricks that allowed her to like monetize her page. And now like that's a major income stream for her. And you never know like who you will connect with and where those conversations will lead you and what you'll learn from them. And you can learn so much too from people who are doing entirely different things from you. And I think about it, and it's like we are two people, right? And we have lots to share, but there's also thousands of people who listen to this podcast, and there's so much opportunity for you all to like learn from each other too. And that involves like that's the community aspect of it. And I'm like, that's the kind of brand that like lights me up and like makes me feel excited, is like a brand that's genuinely like empowering thousands of women and allowing them to like empower each other. You know what I mean? I don't want to
Mhm.
be a talking head that's just like yapping at people. Like I want people to be like, oh yeah, these are the girls that are just like hosting this space that I get to be part of. And yeah, and you're like a member of the community, and you're like, I want to be part of that community, not just like, oh, I want to hear this girl like yap on her mic and she's just a talking head, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I was at an event the other night and I met a girl that had 200,000 subscribers on YouTube. And obviously, I'm a content creator. I might have talked about this on the podcast before, I don't know, but I am trying to get into YouTube right now, so that's a goal of mine, right? And I was saying that a big roadblock that I didn't even realize was a roadblock for me was that I didn't know any YouTubers in real life. I did not know anyone in my personal life that was successful on YouTube. And in my mind, that was a roadblock for me because knowing someone personally, like seeing someone either in person or like having a conversation with them online, like to where you know them on a personal level, it like really humanizes them and it makes you realize that like if they can do it, I can do it. I know like some of my friends in my personal life have told me that they would have never started on social media if they didn't see like me doing it and like me being successful on it, because me doing it has shown them that it's possible. And since I met that girl, after I kind of like digested her channel, and I was like, if this girl could do it, I can do it. Like it
Mm-hmm.
just kind of reminds you that like anything is possible because now you know people personally who were able to accomplish it. And after I left that event, I was like, I would love to be the host of like someone else having that experience. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? Whether it is like an in-person networking event or whether it is a Facebook community. And just we said that we wanted to be as transparent as possible like in this episode and kind of like really show you guys the behind the scenes of our thought process and why we want to build this brand and what we want it to be. My absolute favorite influencer is Jenna Palick, and I like love the Fun on Weekdays brand. I've been like a supporter of hers for such a long time. And I feel like thinking about like what we want this brand to be, we want the Life You Love to be a Fun on Weekdays type community based
Mm-hmm.
brand, but more so along the lines of like, let's help you up level in your 20s. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how are we going to go from like point A to point B, whatever those points A and B are, whether you want to build better habits and routines, whether you want to start a side hustle and eventually take your side hustle full time, whether you do want to get your finances in check. Like we have these pillars kind of like of what makes up a life you love that we want to help take people from point A to point B instead of just teaching you, giving you the resources and the
Mm-hmm.
community to be able to do so.
Yeah. And I think like going back to the community aspect too, then it becomes a situation where it's not like we're just giving you this information. It's like, go do that thing. You know what I mean? It's like you genuinely get to take the steps together, like alongside thousands of other women, alongside us. Like we try to be as transparent as we can on the podcast and on our own social channels. And obviously being like lifestyle creators too, there's like, you have to have like a boundary about how much you share and how much you don't. But like we try to be like as transparent as possible and sharing like the real like raw like here's like how I'm working from getting myself from point A to point B. But yeah, there's also thousands of women in this community that listen to this podcast that like we can all learn from too. And like that's what we want it to be, is you're we're not just giving you information and spitting it at you. You genuinely get to take like steps with other people, alongside other people who either are also working towards that same thing or have already accomplished that thing, or like are aspiring to, you know what I mean? Like that that is just so much, it's so much more exciting to me. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Definitely. Well, the other half of this episode, we wanted to get into sort of what a life you love really means for us. Because again, at the beginning of this episode, we said part of the reason why we wanted to rebrand and de niche from the personal finance space was we've always thought of money as only being a tool to build a life that you love. But we kind of wanted to like take a step back and say, like, let's use this episode as a time to really break down and for us to think through what does a life you love truly mean for us? Because at the end of the day, like that's going to be the foundation of what our episodes are about moving forward for the podcast.
Hmm. Yeah, the first like pillar that we talked about, which I feel like this has been a thing since the beginning, is freedom. And like the way I think of it is there's a book, I think it's in Psychology of Money actually, which is ironic, but it's such a good book. But he says in the book that how in control of your life you feel is a major determinant of your happiness. And I think that when you genuinely feel like you're like in control of your life, you're like, oh, like I actually get to like choose what I do, and you have the like freedom to choose in a way, because like you've got your money together, you're like working on your mindset, like you know what I mean, you have,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that freedom of choice. And I think that's part of the reason why we've also been so attracted to the money topic in the past too, is because money does give you freedom to choose and to like decide what you want to do with it and what you want to use it for and how you want to use it as a tool to build a life you love. And I think that like, yeah, I think
Mm-hmm.
that's been like a big aspect of it, but it doesn't just stop there. Like it's not just about the money side of it, but yeah, like the feeling of like, yeah, I get to like really like live a life that I genuinely love, like because I have the ability to do that.
Yeah, this is definitely where my, I don't even want to say like obsession with personal finance, but I did go through a phase where
Mm-hmm.
I was like personal finance obsessed. And
Yeah.
I hear like some people on social media use the term personal finance obsessed now.
Oh,
And I think
really?
it's like funny, just because like I've definitely taken such a step back from that now that I
Yeah.
have really gotten my finances together and been like, okay, like money's not the end all be all. Like we're
Mm-hmm.
not personal finance obsessed here. But that's definitely where it came from because I was in college, kind of transitioning into my adult life at the time and I started working a job that I hated. I started working a full-time job that I absolutely hated. I like was like my schedule was not ideal. I was wearing like a suit and pointy-toed heels. I was traveling 80% of the time for work into like the middle of nowhere in West Virginia. Like that's where I was traveling every single week and spending my time that summer. And I took like a look at my life and I said, could I imagine the next 40 years of my life looking like this? Like living for the weekend, hating my life during the week. And even if you get into a job that you don't necessarily like quote unquote hate, like you're still giving up so much of your time for someone else for what, like one vacation a year
Mm-hmm.
if you're lucky. And I just like that feeling, like real, I could not get that
Mm-hmm.
feeling in that pit out of my stomach that I did not want my life to look like that. And I think I just went down like a super big rabbit hole of listening to a lot of money podcasts and investing podcasts and real estate investing podcasts and things like that, where people were living these more like untraditional career paths. They were super entrepreneurial, starting businesses, all of that. And that's what really attracted me to the money aspect. So it was like, yes, I was reading money books and listening to money podcasts, but it was never about being obsessed with like my budget or being obsessed with like paying off my debt. Like those were all just a means to an end to give me that freedom and
Mm-hmm.
that time back in my life.
Yeah, I think for me it was the like time aspect of it, and also the freedom. Like the once you have like more control over your money, you're just able to, like for me budgeting, I budget so that I can do more with my money, because when I know where every dollar's going, I find that, oh, like I actually can like afford to go to dinner more often than I thought, or oh, I actually spend more on this than I thought I did, and that's not something I really care to spend that much on. So now I can change that and allow myself, by cutting back on one thing, I can spend more on the other. And that is allowing me to spend on things I actually enjoy. But I also think the time aspect is a big thing for me, because when I became a freelancer, like when I started freelancing after college, and this goes back to what you were saying earlier about being surrounded by people who like really inspire you, but I would start to be around these entrepreneurs who would have multiple companies, or they'd be, like real estate investor and they own a company and they're like a dad and or whatever, mom, and I would be like, how do you manage all of it? And I started to realize how much money played into that, and I'm like, that's part of like they've been able to buy back their time. Like they've been able to use their money to not do the things that they don't want to do. Like they have someone cleaning their house, they have someone like, doing their laundry, doing whatever, like whatever it is, or like running a certain aspect of their business that they don't want to run so that they can spend more time doing the things they love. Or like they were really smart with their money, and so they were able to, invest more when they were younger, and now they're like they're retired early, or, and you know what I mean? Like those things were really, I don't know, just really cool to me, but also the like mindset side of that, like not just the, you know, money side, but like these people, like they would, I mean, if you're meeting people that are like entrepreneurs like this, a lot of them, they have like abundance mindsets. They're not like in a scarcity mindset, like because they've worked on that. They've worked on their mindset. They like take their health seriously, things like that. And that also gives them more freedom. And that's something I think about too with the podcast now being like the life you love. And freedom is obviously connected to money a lot, but it's also connected to other things. Like if I take care of my health, I'm going to have more freedom in my life to like do the things that I want to do, because I'm going to be more mobile when I'm older, and I'm just going to be in like just better health. I'm not spending all this time feeling fatigued and whatever, like because I've taken care of my health. If I focus on my mindset, I'm able to do so much more because I don't view the world through such a small little hole. Like I'm not stuck in a scarcity mindset. And so money is obviously connected to that pillar of freedom that we have, but there's so many other aspects of life that connect back to that. And I think that's like why freedom is one of the big pillars that we're focused on.
Yes, and that transitions us into our second pillar, which is actually wellness. And in this category, we listed confidence, mindset. We talked a little bit about, you and I were talking earlier
Mm-hmm.
about peace. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
really finding peace. And then health is a big aspect of that as well, because, like you said, you are able to do so much more when you are taking your health seriously and you feel your best every day and you feel confident. On the confidence aspect, I said a lot of this for me has to do with being happy before you reach your goals. And I think this
Mm-hmm.
kind of ties into like that peace aspect as well, but truly just like finding peace in your day to day,
Mm-hmm.
finding the confidence in yourself, in your skin, even before you reached kind of like the goals with the like oh, once I lose 20 pounds I'll be
Yeah.
happy, once I like hit X amount of salary like I'll be happy, kind of like finding the happiness before you hit those goals.
I've been on like a big like transformation journey this year, which we're going to do another episode
Yeah.
about. But like part of that has been like focusing on that piece and just like genuinely realizing like what's important, what's not. And like, yeah, just like always kind of making decisions with like peace in mind. And that like, it kind of goes back to the wellness thing too of like I'm not going to let that stress me out, because like it's not worth sacrificing my peace for. Or like, yeah, just being neutral about like my appearance and my body and not tying so much of my worth to that. And like moving my body not because I dislike how it looks, but moving it because when I'm 80 years old, I want to still be kicking. You know what I mean? I want to
Yeah.
be able
Yeah,
to
and
like,
because you
yeah,
enjoy moving your body
right,
because that feels good to you, not because like you didn't go to the gym that day because you ate too much the night before. You
right,
went to the gym
yeah.
because you cherish your body and you enjoy moving it. Yeah,
And when you
totally.
feel like genuinely, and I can like speak to this because have experienced it. Like me a year ago did not feel like at home in my life and in my body. And because so many aspects of this wellness pillar were off for me, like my mindset, my confidence, like just general health, like all of it was off. And when you really have that pillar of wellness, like it's just like you do feel that sense of peace. Like I feel so much more calm in my life, and that's been like massive, and that feeling is so beautiful. And I think like I don't know, I'm excited to have so many more conversations on this
Yeah.
podcast about that, because we have so many conversations offline about it, and being able to put it on the podcast now is just like so
Mhm.
special. But I don't know,
Yeah.
it is a big part of our lives too.
Yeah, even like thinking through again, like bringing back that community aspect of the brand, like thinking through, okay, when we do in-person events or
Mm-hmm.
we our group trip that's
So
coming up,
exciting.
which plugging the group trip again, we'll have all
Yeah.
the details in the show notes if you haven't heard about it. But yeah, when we're doing in-person events and retreats and things, like having that wellness pillar is super important for us. But moving on to the third pillar then, and this is something that I'm like super happy that we included this as a
Mm-hmm.
pillar. And I think it's something that not enough people think about, and this is why like you kind of can't see past a lot of the like, okay, money equals budgeting, saving, like that sort of stuff. But I think you this is kind of like taking it one step further,
Mm-hmm.
I would say. So, again, first pillar was about freedom. So, gaining back your time. But then this pillar, we labeled it fulfillment. And this is sort of like, once you gain back your time, what do you do with it? Like, once you get the money, what do you do with it? If you had $100,000 today, what would you do with it if you no longer had to work? What
Mm-hmm.
would you do with your time? And I think a lot of people can't answer that question. And just kind of like reminding yourself that building a life that you truly love does not mean like having a shit ton of money and never having to do anything again for the rest of your life and just like going and laying on a beach for the rest of your life,
Mm-hmm.
or like going and like sitting in your house for the rest of your life. It's about like working on things that make you feel fulfilled and that you genuinely wake up in the morning and say, I am so excited to do what I need to do today, or
Mm-hmm.
I get to do X, Y, and Z things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so fulfilling to me.
And I think too, it for us, it's been a lot, like it's been very work focused. Like I'm very fulfilled by the work that I do. I know that you are fulfilled by the work that you do as well. And we, being like entrepreneurial women, are, and just like career driven women in general, I know we focused a lot on our career, but also like some people just like they don't really care about having a career they feel fulfilled by, but it's about having a life you feel fulfilled by too. Like, if you maybe like your job, you're like, I like it, but like I don't really want to monetize my like interest. Like I would
Mm-hmm.
rather just like keep that as a hobby. Like how are you incorporating that into your life? Like how are you making sure that you feel fulfilled at the end of the day? And that doesn't mean that every single aspect of your life has to be totally perfect. Like we've talked about this before. I live in an apartment right now that is really not like where I want to be living. It's a beautiful apartment, very grateful for it, but like it's not in the area I would love to be in. I want to be closer to a city, whatever. Am I the most fulfilled by like my living environment and feeling like, oh, like every aspect of my life is fulfilled? No, I'm working towards that, but how am I prioritizing fulfillment in other areas so that at the end of the day, when I go to bed, I'm like, I like my life. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
I liked today. Like, and not every single thing was like the best, or not every aspect of my day was exactly what I wanted, but I'm going to keep working towards that. And I'm still going to feel fulfilled because I'm prioritizing things that bring me that fulfillment, even when it's not every single piece of my life, rather than being like, well, this isn't right. And in this part, I don't feel fulfilled, so I'm not going to do anything about the other
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Like, it's like, no, I'm going to do what's within my power and what I can to manifest the changes I want to see, but I'm still going to prioritize like
Yeah.
finding things that fulfill me, whether that's work related or not.
That's such a good point. I always think about this pillar in terms of sort of like more the career aspect, which is like totally a part of this pillar for
Right.
sure. But even just like thinking about my life right now and like where I'm finding pieces of fulfillment like in my life. I'm doing 75 soft right now, and one rule for myself is waking up at 5:30 in the morning. And I have been finding so much like fulfillment and peace for getting up at 5:30 and watching the sunrise on my balcony. Like
Mm-hmm.
something about like even as small as that is making me wake up in the morning with a smile on my face, being like, I am so excited to go just like sit out there in the quiet and like watch the sunrise. So, yeah, just like finding those little points of fulfillment like through your day to day. And I do think a lot of that has to do with community. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you feel so much more fulfilled when you are putting yourself in spaces and finding community in like parts of your life that matter to you, whether you are like a super active person and you're in a run club and that's your like social outing once a week, or whether you're in a book club, or whether you have a really good church community or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. So I think that's like a big aspect of it as well.
Yeah. And I think from these conversations that we have about, like, again, we try to be transparent about like, really showing, like, pulling back the curtain and showing, like, how we are building lives we love. We hope that that inspires people who listen to this podcast, you guys, to then go and take action on that, because we do talk about attraction and action at the same time, but like, we want you to hear the things we're talking about and be like, you know what? Like, I don't feel very fulfilled in my life right now. And you know what? I'm not doing enough of what I actually enjoy. And so I'm going to, after I listen to this podcast episode, like, I'm going to go and yeah, like I'm going to go apply to volunteer at the dog shelter because I love dogs, and like that's something that would really bring me some fulfillment and I want to take action on that. Or yeah, I'm going to go like find a church community, or I'm going to join the run club, or whatever it is. Like, and I think, yeah, I think just hearing those conversations, we want you to like hear us talking about these things and then be like, I'm also striving for a life that has freedom and wellness and fulfillment, and like actually take action towards that. And I think yeah, that's what we like. I don't know. That's what we want you to do at the end of the day is
I
to like
know.
genuinely use this podcast and this community to create a life that you genuinely look forward to waking up to. And that at the end of the day, when you go to bed, you're like, I like my life because that, like, if you, especially if you can, like, if, I mean, it doesn't matter what age you are, but if you can start today thinking about, like, I want to make however many days I have left in this life, I want to make as many of them as possible days that I love or that I enjoyed or doing things that I love. Like, that is like,
Yeah.
that's such a flex. You know what I mean? Like when I'm 80 years old or whatever, and I'm like a little old grandma and I'm talking to my grandkids and I'm like, yeah, like I built like a badass life and like I loved my life. Like I loved my job. I like really like prioritized these things. I was happy. Like that is such a flex to be like, you know what I mean? To
Yeah.
to age and be like, I lived a damn good life.
Mhm.
And part of that comes from like really understanding what you want and then like taking action towards it. And we want this to be the community that helps you get there.
Definitely. Yeah, for sure. I hope that you can hear like the excitement in our voice because I think like just I mean, speaking for both of us honestly, we have been so excited about this rebrand and it's been hard to keep it quiet on our socials.
Mm-hmm.
So we can hope that you can hear how excited we are and we hope this episode kind of gave you a little bit of a taste for what you can expect from the podcast moving forward and like the types of episodes that we have coming out. We're so excited for some of the things we have coming up on our calendar between solo episodes, but then also kind of like reincorporating guests into the podcast as well. Because we, again, like we have a lot of things to talk about and yap about, but there's also so many awesome people out there with stories to tell and things to share with you guys. So I think that brings us to the end of this episode, our first episode as the Life You Love podcast, which is so crazy to
Yay!
say. But if you have any things that you want us to cover in future episodes or any questions about the rebrand or questions in general, leave them in Spotify. Please DM us on Instagram at the Life You Love podcast, which is so weird to say because it's been Girls Talk Money Pod for so long. But DM us on Instagram as well if you want to chat. We love hearing from you guys. But thank you for tuning into the podcast. And until next week.